Okay, so let's get right into it. When you hear OpenAI, you probably think ChatGPT, right? But what if I told you that building those AI models, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we're really talking about here is OpenAI's absolutely audacious, multi-trillion-dollar plan to achieve total independence. We're talking about controlling the entire AI pipeline, from the tiny silicon chip all the way to a brand new device in your hands. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're dealing with, in just 2.5 years, OpenAI's valuation went up by almost 17 times. Yeah, 16.7x. They jumped from a $30 billion company to one worth half a trillion. I mean, that kind of growth is just insane, even for Silicon Valley. But, and this is a big but, is this incredible empire actually built on solid ground, or is it all on borrowed land? You see, for all that staggering value, OpenAI is shockingly vulnerable. It's a tech giant that literally depends on other giants just to exist. And understanding that dependency, well, that's the key to their entire master plan. Right, so to really get what OpenAI is up to, we first have to dig into this paradox. We have to look at the two huge vulnerabilities that have them backed into a corner. So OpenAI's whole problem really boils down to two things: an upstream dependency and a downstream one. Upstream, they are completely at the mercy of NVIDIA. They need NVIDIA's GPUs to train their models. It's basically the brain of the whole operation. No chips, no thinking. Then downstream, they are tied to Microsoft. They need the Azure cloud to be their body, the infrastructure that actually gets their AI out to millions of users like you and me. So think about that. They don't control their own brain, and they don't control their own body. That is a very tough spot to be in. So what do you do when you're cornered like that? Well, you declare war, an incredibly expensive, high-stakes war for independence, and they're fighting it on two fronts at the same time. All right, let's tackle that first front, the upstream battle. How in the world does OpenAI plan to break free from NVIDIA's stranglehold on the chip market? How do they achieve what some are calling compute freedom? Well, it turns out they have a pretty clever three-step plan. So here's how it breaks down. Step 1, diversify. They've already struck a massive deal with AMD. This is their plan B, making sure they're not putting all their eggs in the NVIDIA basket. Step 2, optimize. They're partnering with Broadcom to build custom networking tech, basically controlling the arteries of their data centers so they don't have to use NVIDIA's proprietary stuff. And then there's step 3, the final offensive, dominate. This is the big one. They want to design their own custom AI chips. And that, right there, is the real story behind that crazy $7 trillion number you might have heard about. It's not that they're going to spend that much. It's about the kind of capital it would take to build a whole new semiconductor industry from scratch. But okay, controlling your own chips is only half the battle. Now we've got to look at the second front, the downstream fight. It's not enough to have the world's most powerful brain in a box. You also have to control how people actually use it. This is all about owning that final mile right to the user. So what's the playbook here? First off, they're going direct. With ChatGPT Enterprise, they're selling straight to the biggest companies in the world, basically cutting out the middleman. And it's working. Over 92% of the Fortune 500 are already using it. But then there's the really audacious move. They're reportedly working with Johnny Ive. Yes, the Johnny Ive, the design mastermind behind the iPhone. The goal here isn't just a cool new gadget. No. The goal is to create a whole new computing platform from the ground up, one that completely bypasses Apple and Google's ecosystems. They want to create the next iPhone moment, but this time, it'll be all theirs. So, a two-front war for total control, from the silicon inside the data center to a device in your pocket. It is an absolutely incredible plan, but the price tag for all this ambition, well, it's just staggering. Over the next decade, OpenAI has committed to spending $1.15 trillion on infrastructure. Let me say that again, $1.15 trillion. That's not a typo. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire infrastructure budget of some fairly large countries. It's a level of spending from a private company that is completely, totally unprecedented. And this is where the math gets really, really weird. Look at this. In 2025, OpenAI is projected to make about $13 billion in revenue, but their annualized spending commitment is around $115 billion. The numbers just don't line up at all. It means their net profit is basically zero. Every dollar they make is immediately eaten up by just keeping the lights on, leaving nothing for this colossal expansion. So where on earth is all this money coming from? Well, this leads to a concept that has some people pretty nervous. It's called circular financing. Here's how it works. You have suppliers, like Microsoft and NVIDIA, who invest billions of dollars into OpenAI. Then, OpenAI takes that exact same money and uses it to place massive orders back with those same suppliers. You see the loop? It creates this self-referencing cycle of value that looks amazing on paper, but historically, it can be a huge red flag for a financial bubble.
But look, the folks at OpenAI aren't naive about these risks. In fact, CEO Sam Altman was shockingly honest about it. When asked how he was going to fund this trillion-dollar vision, he just said, "We might get this wrong. There's some chance of that." I mean, wow. For the CEO of a company making a bet this huge, that's a pretty stunning admission of just how high the stakes are.
Okay, so what if this colossal gamble doesn't quite work out perfectly? What if they win on one front, but they lose on the other? This is where it gets really fascinating, because a partial victory could lead to two wildly different futures for OpenAI.
Let's play this out. On one hand, you have the Hollow King scenario. This is where their AI device is a smash hit. It's the next iPhone, but they fail to make their own chips. So they'd be the king of this new platform, but they'd be completely dependent on NVIDIA, paying them a fortune just to keep the kingdom running. They'd have the crown, but none of the cash. Then you have the other possibility, the AWS for intelligence scenario. Here, their hardware device is a total flop, but they do succeed in building their own super cheap, powerful custom chips. In this future, OpenAI doesn't own the end user. Instead, they become the monopoly wholesaler of AI power. They become the utility company for intelligence, selling their compute to everyone, maybe even Apple and Google.
So, when you step back and look at this whole thing, it's clear this isn't just another business plan. This is an all-out war for the future of technology, and the outcome is anything but certain.
So let's just boil it all down. What's the takeaway? The goal is total vertical integration, controlling everything from the silicon to the screen. The conflict is this high-stakes war to break free from today's tech titans. The cost is an absolutely mind-bending $1.15 trillion bet. And the outcome? Well, that's going to determine if OpenAI becomes the next great tech empire or just a very, very expensive cautionary tale.
And that really brings us to the final trillion-dollar question that hangs over all of this. Is OpenAI actually building the fundamental infrastructure for the future of humanity? Or are we just watching the inflation of what could be the biggest financial bubble in the history of the world? We're gonna have to wait and see.